Happy birthday, Leaplings.
Leaplings?
Yes. Leaplings actually is what they call the babies who are born on February 29th for the leapers. Leaplings.
I like leapers better. Do you know any leaplings or leapers?
I'll have to check my Facebook birthdays. I'm not sure.
Yeah. They're probably lying if they are. I mean, what is that? If it's 365 times 4, so there's a 1 in whatever the answer to that is chance of that happening.
But I always think like, so just every fourth year we're just gonna add a day, and we're all okay with that. That's how it's gonna be. That's okay.
Yeah, I don't know whose idea it was. They were probably British.
Well, I guess we're gonna have to take a minute to figure that out.
Yeah,
hey, why don't we play the theme song and we'll go check it out on Google.
So did you know that in Ireland, Leap Day is known as Bachelor's Day, and women are encouraged to propose marriage? Do either of you have any Leap Day traditions? Do you ask people to marry you on Leap Day, Stacy?
I'm already married. I don't think I'm going to ask anybody else.
It's very expensive.
My Leap Day tradition is to go. It's Leap Day.
That's mine. It's like
we get another one. All right.
I feel like we just did this. I feel like they should start the Olympics, since it's every 4 years, on Leap Day. Like they should just do that. That should be a thing. Somebody really dropped the ball there.
Yeah. Well, what came first though? Leap year or the Olympics? I would think the Olympics way outdate leap year.
I don't know. I've never made a calendar before.
Well, how about a game of leapfrog? In May of 1991, a team of 14 students from Stanford University set a Guinness World Record by leapfrogging for how long? 996.2 miles. They started on May 16th and finished 244 hours and 43 minutes later on May 26th. Wow.
Yeah. Is leapfrogging, is that an Olympic sport? It should be.
I thought that was the original Navy SEALs. Weren't the leapfrogs founded in like 1974?
Oh, I don't know. I think we're just making stuff up now.
No, you should know these Navy history stuff.
I was in the Navy through basic and core school, and then I forgot everything I ever learned when the Marines took over. I forgot how to count. I can barely walk.
And on that note, let's get the show started.
This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Leaping lizards. Happy Leap Day, Alphas. We've decided to take advantage of this extra day to introduce you to our brand new, newly polished, newly minted Tango Alpha Lima hosts, Mr. Joe Worley and Mr. Adam Marr. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Stacy. It's great to be here.
I do appreciate you, Stacy. I was told there would be food.
The bank will have to wait. Joe, I want to introduce you to all the Alphas. Joe was a corpsman and a field medic and is currently Veterans Relations liaison with America's Vet Dogs, who coincidentally is where my service dog Charlie is from. And little fun fact, I've known Joe for a while. We met at an American Legion convention where he actually encouraged me to apply for a service dog.
And you shot me.
With a camera.
With a camera. Yeah.
That is a big distinction, Joe. A big, big distinction.
A Canon, right?
It was a Nikon.
Nikon watch your mouth, sir. So over here, ribbing me about cannons is Adam Marr. He's was an Army Apache helicopter. Are you guys like the Marines, where you're always a Marine, or
always?
Always.
It never leaves you.
Okay.
I have this memorabilia right behind me just to remind me.
I love that. So if you're on the YouTube watching it, you can see these cool little flags over his shoulder. If not, I'm looking at something Army with some wings on it. Probably a helicopter.
Very succinct.
Right, Adam?
Yeah, so one is my guide on from company command, and the other was a gift from my battalion commander, and it's an Apache pilot with his helmet on and inside the aircraft. Pretty
I
cool.
love that. So, Adam, you're currently the director of operations for the Veteran and Mental Health Leadership Coalition, which you were talking about on Tango Alpha Lima not too long ago as a guest, or the Be the One podcast with Amy Forsyth back in December. So, Alphas, if you haven't heard that interview, take a little rewind, go back, listen, and then you'll know who Adam is. But until then, Adam, Joe, why don't we talk a little bit, get to know each other?
Sounds beautiful. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I think we have a really good representation of branch of service and of jobs. It's kind of fun. Adam, you were a pilot. Can you talk to me a little bit about your path to the military and why you chose to become a pilot?
Yeah, for sure. September 11th was my senior year of high school. So, it's a formidable time in anybody's life. 18 years old. And look, it changed the direction and course of my life, forever. As I'm sure it did you also, as it did for, really the entire world. And so, I graduated shortly thereafter and was able to get a scholarship to ROTC at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth. And so spent 4 years in a fraternity, getting a bachelor's, and then also learning how to become a leader. And when it came time to select which branch we wanted to, I was like, I don't know anything about flying. I don't know anything about helicopters, but I know the Army's been doing it for some time. So, they'll probably teach me what I need to know. And so it was my first choice, and I was lucky and fortunate enough to get that. And so then I departed to Fort Rucker, now Fort Novosel, in Southeast Alabama, where we actually just relocated about a year ago. And I went to flight school during the surge, and it was a wild time because we were plussing up all these soldiers to send over to Iraq and Afghanistan, and so they were also increasing the amount of aviators, but they were not increasing the amount of helicopters. And so you got this like huge backlog. And I think we had like at one point, it was like 2,000 like second lieutenants or first lieutenants. And maybe it was like an equal amount or more of like WO1 warrant officers. And everybody was just waiting for a spot to be able to get into the next, cohort. So my time finally came, and I spent about 2 years in flight school, which is a little bit long, but also because of the backlog. And then again, like I basically wanted to fly 2 aircraft, and one was the Apache, because I said my logic was if I'm going to go over there and somebody's going to shoot at me, like I want to be able to shoot back. Or the other mission set that really appealed to me was the exact opposite of that, which was medevac, saying like if somebody's hurt, then I want to go to them and help get them off. And so I was lucky enough to get my first choice, and then ultimately went to Fort Riley, Kansas, where I went straight into a platoon leader position. I was there for 4 or 5 years, got my company command there, deployed to Iraq, and generally had a pretty good aviation career for about 10 years until I decided it was time for, a change and to step into something new.
Wow, that's cool. Hey, Joe, you're Navy, but you actually were with Marine Corps Infantry. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. Alternatively, I decided when I went in that when people shot at me that I was going to be legally obligated to not shoot back. So, thanks to the Geneva Convention as a medic, I've always tested well, and I knew better than to follow my ASVAB into something like the nuke program like they wanted me to. I knew that going with the Marines was going to be more my speed. And I ended up going through basic into Corps School, and then went over to Field Medical Service School in California, having only at that point in my life been in the surrounding states of Georgia for the most part. It was an adventure. I'd never forget seeing the ocean for the first time, and all I'd ever seen was Gulf Ocean with like 3-foot tall waves, and I thought we were in the middle of like a tsunami or something the first time I saw the ocean. And I just fell in love with the change in my life at that point. I ended up deploying to Fallujah, Iraq, with 2-1 Marines, and got a little banged up, got a nice parking spot out of it, and here we are. You know, this was all the way back. I got hurt in 04 and spent a little time in the hospital. And I think one of the best things that happened to me was accidentally falling into nonprofit, like America's Vet Dogs, and being smart enough to hold on for dear life and realize that it was an avenue for me to still serve veterans and to use my experiences in a way that added to the world. And so I'm super, just absolutely humbled and blessed to be here with you, sharing this experience.
Well, I know for sure that you changed the course of my life, and my life has been so much more enriched with having my service dog by my side. So thank you for that, Joe. And Adam, you're also in the nonprofit sphere, right? What are you doing today?
Yeah, also like Joe, I kind of got thrust into it. So I mean, I was kind of ready to transition to what's next and looking at maybe the traditional pathway of, officer to corporate executive route. But my older brother was a Special Forces Green Beret, medically retired for TBI and PTSD. So 2013, I started to see the signature wounds of war, materialize in him, and then him really just start to spiral and almost become a statistic that we're all too familiar with. Yeah. So early on, we were able to find help and alternative therapy outside of the medical system, outside of the DOD, outside of the VA. And it was a protocol that helped rebalance the hormones in his brain that had been affected by TBI and reduce the inflammation. And so when you're able to do that for a soldier, male, female, special forces or not, and something else we learned along the way was you don't have to go unconscious to suffer a TBI. And there's actually this thing called a mild traumatic TBI. And anytime you rattle your head to any degree, which I think as a result of the occupation that we all had, we're prone to at certain times. And it has a continual effect of growing over the course of your life. So it's something that we could probably all optimize and benefit from. But specifically for him, like, it was instrumental in helping to kind of start to reverse what conventional knowledge was saying was a new life for him. So once you're able to kind of get a little bit of answers, hope, and healing, it's absolutely profound when you're struggling so much to just try and exist. So through that, we created Warrior Angels Foundation in 2015, 501c3. And the initial goal was to be able to try and raise funds to offset the cost of this treatment, for veterans that had suffered this. And I learned a lot doing that, starting a nonprofit up, from scratch, and trying to find funding, and then also serve the community and answer this, larger than life problem that I felt, so many people should be focusing on, and it just wasn't where we were collectively looking at that time. So I can expand upon this for hours, but essentially the last 8 years since getting out in 2015, or I guess it's about 9 years now, have been serving the veteran community on the forefront of veteran mental health. And so that was originally through Warrior Angels Foundation, and then also the education and the knowledge, some evergreen content that we put out in the form of our book that I co-wrote with my brother called Tales from the Blast Factory, which then got picked up and made and expanded upon into a full feature award-winning documentary that, again, told my brother's story, but also other individuals, civilian athletes, male, female, that suffered from this, and what it's like to experience this, but then what it's like to actually find something that's working, and what happens to an individual when you start to get your life back. Well, that kind of translates into the current role that I have as the Director of Operations with the Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition. So it's a coalition of about 50 other organizations, about 100 members. These are executive leaders, CEOs, nonprofit executive directors, researchers, scientists, doctors, lawyers, regulators, And everybody has profoundly been impacted in some way, shape, or form by something that we're calling breakthrough therapies, which more conventionally have been labeled, psychedelic therapies. And so what we're finding is for the veteran community that's, pushed to the extremes in many capacities for many different reasons. But when all the other conventional mental health, talk therapy, SSRIs fail, these breakthrough therapies and these psychedelic assisted therapies are showing profound results in helping to address the underlying causes of mental health. And so the VMHLC advocates for that at the state and the federal level, helping to unlock funding and create thoughtful, programming around this. And, kind of segue to why I'm here, and decided to join this show was simply because one of our coalition members talked about the work that she was doing at her Legion post and how they were being bold enough to pass resolution out of their post in Montana and say, hey, we think that we should research these things and we should explore all viable options. And so I said, well, hey, I'm going to go join my local post in Alabama and see what the Legion is all about, because, I've been so focused on that specific problem within mental health that I didn't really know about, the 2 million members and the infrastructure, across the country and all these wonderful programs the Legion had. And that, the idea was if we could share about the work that we're doing on the forefront of mental health, trying to fight for, veterans. And let's just be honest, it's not just veterans, it's humanity that's struggling right now. And not to say that this is the only way, but if it's proving effective and can be done safely, should it really be illegal? And so with that, we had the opportunity to present at nationals last year in Charlotte to the TBI and suicide prevention panel on these breakthrough therapies. The Legion at the national level passed a resolution only like a month or so later, putting pressure on the VA and Congress to do this. And so I just thought that was so cool, man, because it's showing like the ethos of what the Legion is and can be into practical application. And it was all happening, in my worldview and in the circles that I was working in. So then I had a chance to come and be on the Be the One podcast last November, and just continuing to show up in my posts and share this has, ignited and sparked them to take an interest in this. And what I found is, they wanted to know, they wanted to help. This just wasn't on their radar. So it was a great opportunity to start to kind of bridge this gap between generations. And so when the opportunity came to come and join you and Joe on the podcast, it was a no-brainer for me. One, because of the opportunity to interview entertaining and really remarkable leaders in their own right, doing some remarkable things, but also within the veteran community. And I think what it ultimately boils down to is I initially signed up after 9/11 and did ROTC and went into aviation because I thought it was the most important thing I could do in my life at that time. And I signed up to be of service and to be a servant. Mm-hmm. And I got thrust into trauma and the signature wound of war. And it was just like, okay, are you going to succumb to it? Or are you going to try and dig in, try and find another way? And then when we do, and we're able to do that, well, we turn around and we look at our battle. We look at our left and right and we say, hey, how can that rising tide raise all ships? And so anyway, that's a little bit about me. Obviously, I'm very passionate, about this work because, I look out and I say the fact that this is still a problem and we still are facing these numbers and what we currently have, across, the country and across the veteran community, for whatever reason, it's not working. So let's work on ourselves. Let's find ways to work together. And when we do so, let's show up from love with love and compassion, being able to listen to one another. And I think when we're able to do that, we're going to really surprise ourselves with where we're able to go.
I think,
Adam,
yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I relate so much to what you're saying about, you signed up to be a helicopter pilot and you signed up to be a servant. I signed up the same thing, to serve my country. And I identified with being a combat photographer. That's all I was ever going to be. I excelled at it and I loved every minute. I didn't expect it to end so soon. And when my career came to an abrupt end, I grieved for it in a way I cannot express. And that coupled with post-traumatic stress and unprocessed traumas, I thought about suicide and I had a plan and thankfully, through the help of friends and interventions and different modalities, including a service dog, that the whole perspective changed and I started the Veterans Portrait Project. What I realized in that time though, and I'm sure that you had that same experience, Adam, and you did too, Joe, is my military service wasn't what defined me. It made me who I was. It was a preamble to who I am, but everything that happened to me, the experiences, the traumas I had to experience to be ready for the next chapter, to be ready to do what I do now through my television series with After Action, through doing the Veterans Portrait Project, through, being an evangelist for service animals and helping other veterans with their own mental health journey. And I think, Joe, you've talked about this too a lot, that your Navy career was so short,
Yeah.
but what you're doing is so incredibly special. Can you talk a little bit about what that transition was like for you?
Absolutely. To your point, Adam, I consider myself and have considered myself blessed that I was injured with an IED outside of the vehicle, because it's just a single blast. When you're inside of a vehicle, it's like getting punched 100 times in the head. And I've seen, I use the word luck a lot before I had to stop and give myself some credit, and eventually realized that me not being somebody who drank or smoke, or I was able to get off all the medications and things that I was on. It really gave me an opportunity to have time to look inward and to find the good. War is obviously a bad thing, but we're crazy if we don't try to use the good that comes from that. The fact that we have mechanical prosthetics that work better than the 2004 versions of the computer chip legs, the fact that we have hands that can articulate the way that they do, the fact that we've gotten so much knowledge from in these tie-ins from TBIs and post-traumatic stress, and the fact that we now know more about the human mind than we ever have. I mean, these are beautiful things that come out of ugly things. And it's given me an opportunity to use these things in my life and to teach others. When we spoke to Chip Conley, we were talking about our experiences and how we reach out to people. And I think on my end, the best thing that I can do is be positive, be myself, and express the things that I've been and the things that I've learned in my life and my actions, because some people look at what you're doing and don't ever listen to what you're saying. They see you being who you are, your upbeats, your downbeats, and they're looking for flaws. They're looking for mistakes. They're looking for you to slip up, because it gives them an opportunity to undermine their own progress in some way. And it's a lot of responsibility. When people look at us, when I go to the gym and I'm not feeling it, and somebody mentions, hey, you really motivate me, and I'm like, oh, now I got to really work, because I don't want to show up and I've realized how important that is with the mental health side of things as well. I talk about a lot of things. Stacy, you've heard me say a lot in it, but a lot of that comes from who I am as an individual, and that's somebody who just loves people. And I want people to be better, and I want people to open up their minds. It's incredible leadership in the American Legion to open up their minds to something that is as bold as what you're doing, Adam. And I mean, and it started with them acknowledging service dogs and equine therapy and these things that work in different ways for different people. I mean, I've known people that have never shook hands with a horse in their life go to equine therapy and have it be a life-altering moment for them. And service dogs and and the things that you're doing, Adam. I mean, we've got to push the boundaries. We have to use the good out of the mud that we're in. You know, we got to make houses out of it. We got to have shelter. We got to find a way to work together. The whole time we're in the military, Stacy, I think, you know, and we've talked about this before, we're taught to work together as a team. And you never want to be the weak link in a team. But the problem is when we get out, we isolate ourselves and we still don't want to be that weak link. So we end up just digging this big fat hole that we live in. And next thing we know, it's coming in on us and it starts raining. And we don't even know how to ask for help anymore because it's not in our nature to be like, hey, I'm lagging here. I'm the problem. How do we fix this? And having that time and having conversations like this is how we remind people that it's really rough to dig that hole. Tough people dig deep holes, and we need each other. We can't sit on an island by ourselves, because the more opportunities I have to talk to you, Adam, and to you, Stacy, and to the alphas, the more opportunity I get to understand myself, and it gives me an opportunity to in a weird sort of way use the bad stuff that's happened to me. And when you're using something, you have control. You're the one holding the bat. You're the one holding the axe when you're cutting down a tree. And if you let go of it, you're going to get hurt. So
I think, oh yeah, no, incredible, bro. And I think one of the things that I hear you saying and talking about as I listen to you talk about just your beautiful journey, you know, to the present, and your philosophy is the mindset that you have to be able to look at these things, where you've been, what you've been through. And you said something, and I actually wrote it down and put it in quotes. I'm blessed that I was blown up outside of a vehicle. Like, somebody could be listening to that and be like, okay, this guy's crazy. How is that a blessing? Right. And I think you eloquently did, you know, kind of tie it together, but I just wanted to come back to it and maybe tie it to mindset. What was the mindset in the journey to be able to get to a point in life where you say, look, losing this appendage in this manner, in a way that I could have never, like, you know, mapped out for myself, was a blessing?
I saw the lines of miracle in it when I got hurt. I spent, I mean, I was in Iraq from March 1st until September 17th when I got hurt. And then I landed on American soil on the 22nd of September. On the day that I was injured, my 9mm was on my hip. That happened less than 2 weeks. I always kept it here because my bag went over. I had one of those mountain packs and it sat on my hip, and it always covered my weapon up. So I always kept my weapon here. That morning I chose food over getting my weapon the way I wanted it, and I will always choose food. And it's only been reinforced by the fact that this saved my life, because once we got in the 7 tons, when we got in the vehicles to head out, you're not messing with your gear on the road, because that's just a inviting disaster. And so I still had my 9mm on my hip instead of on my Kevlar or on my vest. And we get there, comms were down. 11 days before that, on Labor Day, I lost most of my second squad to a suicide bomber. And so everybody's just like as torqued out. We need communication with battalion. Didn't have time to fix it then. And then I got that call where I got hurt, where one of my Marines, the back of his leg had gotten cut open while they were setting up. And we had to go take care of him. And that's when I got hurt. So when I got blown up, my 9mm on my hip, which happened again less than 2 weeks of the entire deployment, was busted into 5 pieces. So you add that in with the fact that I lived through an explosion that completely destroyed a vehicle and killed 2 Marines, and the secondary explosion is usually the big one. You know, they use one to disable a vehicle. And I took that one to the face and lived through it. And you know the movie Swordfish, where all the ball bearings are like flying through the air. I would pay money to see how close it was. I would pay money. But you know, that big moment for me is a hole in the road that's less than the size of a golf ball, it looks like on film. And it's such a humbling thing to realize that cars can drive over this thing that altered the entire trajectory of my life and not even realize it. It's interesting. It's interesting. I think it's good to have those moments where you realize the grain of sand. But I saw the miracles in how I got there, and the fact that I really should have been dead, and I thought I was. I was able to roll over and put a tourniquet on myself. I did all those things. My leg was traumatically amputated. There was some still, I won't get into the nitty-gritty details, but I knew the leg. At no point was I like, maybe they can save it. It was absolutely traumatically amputated. And
So what are you thinking, like, when that's actually happening?
I thought I was dead.
Really?
I mean, when I got hurt, I remember going up in the air. I remember hitting the ground. I really thought I was dead. And so when I hit the ground, I started thinking, like, who wants to be in the line, St. Peter, or, whatever your belief system is, and be like, yeah, I just laid there until I died. So I'm not going to do that. So I rolled over, and I was like, and then the body mechanic, the corpsman in me turned on and said, I can do this. Just put a tourniquet on, pressure dressing on the right side, shot myself up with morphine. I was super excited about that because I've never even been drunk. Complete letdown. I wrote the time down, but I was able to do those things, incredible training, a lot of really, really, really incredible people. I needed to get to that vehicle where my Marines had been hit, which is where I was running when I got hurt. I was physically unable to do so. I realized I was killing myself even trying. And I saw how close it was. I knew how close it was. They actually replaced the entire volume of my blood over 72 hours through different blood transfusions.
Whoa.
And I mean, we read
was that
some
in
stuff.
Germany, or was that, did you get,
I went to,
what was the process?
Baghdad, Balad, Longstool. And so they would just stabilize me and move me. And so that throughout that 3-day process, they replaced the entire volume of my blood. I have anti-D antibodies now because they ran out of the blood that I needed. And I ended up in fact, had a very interesting interaction. I was trying to give platelets, and the guy pulls me to the side and he's like, you've got antibodies we can't use. And he's like, I can talk to your wife and let her know it's not, anything like clandestine. And I'm like, he was really nervous about it. I'm like, no, I knew I had this. I just didn't realize it would bar me from being able to give platelets. So
should have been like, what? How did these get in me?
Yeah.
Speaking of your wife, you were a new father at the time, right? When you got wounded? Can you talk to me a little bit?
I had a 3-month-old daughter I'd never met. And here we go. Okay, so I was after I got hurt, as soon as I got hurt, I remember reaching into my cargo pocket where I always kept my my tourniquet. I had, a cravat on a stick and a grenade pin. Any medic out there knows what I'm talking about. But basically, you tie the cravat, you spin the stick that's, the cravat's tied to, and then you slide a grenade pin, sans grenade, onto the we tried that a few times. It didn't work out well. But you slide the grenade pin over the stick to keep it from untwirling, and that's what keeps the tourniquet tight. And as many high-tech Israeli tourniquets as we get, there's just something about a rag and a stick that just gets the job done. And so when I got hurt, instead of digging through my pack for anything fancy, that's what I wanted. I reached in my cargo pocket to get that thing I'd been carrying around since Field Med. And I had a little pin, like a little vote for Pedro thing, except for it had my daughter's face on it. And I just felt it. And it was just like a splash of cold water for me. And I think, as cool as I'd like to be, like, yeah, I just man through it. I mean, I really just had a moment of, I have something home for me. I have a wife and I have a daughter and a family. And I think the biggest step towards being who I am, that mindset, was I was in the hospital waiting to meet my daughter for the first time and see my wife and my mother. And I was soaking my hands in this blue tub of water, trying to get my hands clean. And I just could not get my hands. I just felt like it was so dirty. And I had a moment, and I'm sure it was the hospital meds, but I had a moment where I realized that I needed to find a way to take this broken person and all these things that I'd been through in the last 7 months, and this clean, brand new, beautiful child, and I needed to make that into one person. I couldn't separate those things because I feel like that was going to end up causing me to implode. And I needed to find a way to make that one person. And I had everything going for me. I had a church back home sending me deer jerky. If you can't get better on deer jerky, you don't deserve to get better. I'll die on that hill. I had a healthy daughter. I had everything I needed. I almost said I was lucky that I didn't drink or smoke, but at some point you have to admit you've made good decisions, and it's hard to say that about yourself, but I just luckily was able to move past those things pretty quickly and start focusing on how to what's the term that we used earlier, to just to process, to work through those things that I'd been through. I had an
Metabolize.
opportunity, yes, metabolize that trauma. And so I had that time to really work through. I wasn't a great dad for the first year and a half. I was still on all those hospital meds. I was in and out of surgery. I had 30 something surgeries, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know who I was. I hid in video games and books and movies, and that was my drugs. That was my coping mechanism. And I think in some ways it was good. And then I caught myself within a couple of months of it becoming a real dangerous crutch. And
Well, I mean, it's hard enough to have to be a new father,
yeah,
and then to be a new father while deployed, and then your injury on top of that. So I mean, I can relate on two of those. My first daughter, Amelia, who's 13 now, I was in Iraq, or we had just deployed. We had just gotten to Kuwait. My wife and I it was one of those things where we were like, okay, are we going to be married for 5 months before the deployment? Or are we going to have like an 18-month engagement? And, like any young kid, you opt for, being together now. And so we did, an unplanned and unforecasted. We went on R&R to Vegas and conceived in New York, unknowingly.
you
And
should Google how that happened.
I'm in Kuwait on the phone banks talking to my wife, and she's like, "Hey, we're pregnant," and I'm like, "Who's the father?" Like, no, I'm obviously I'm kidding, but
Awkward.
but like that's how I felt to a degree, because I was like, hold on, this wasn't what we had planned for. I'm going to be gone for a year now. And she moved home to be with her family. She went through the whole pregnancy. And then, I was supposed to be there for the birth. I was able to move my R&R around, which is a blessing in and of itself, because so many people don't get that. And then my daughter ended up coming early, and I was supposed to fly a mission that day. And I told like the flight lead, I was like, "Hey man, like my wife is in labor." And he's like, "Okay, what do you want me to do about it?" And I'm like, "No, man, like I can't fly today. Like I'm not mentally like here." And luckily our S3, our major, we were able to get somebody. And I went into my chew, and I watched my daughter be born on Skype, which I know everybody doesn't get that experience.
Yeah.
And I was really grateful for it. And then I went home and met my daughter maybe 2 weeks later, was my R&R was supposed to be. So not the 3 months that you had to, but seeing her for the first time in the airport, and being handed this little thing when I just left like 9 months ago, and I just had a newlywed wife, and now there's three of us. This is wild. And being home was great, but then having to go back for 3 more months was one of the hardest things, where I'm like really questioning my life choices. And I'm like, why am I here? Why am I going to this part of this country at this time in the war, when I don't feel like, our mission is of great, value to whatever, reason. And I got into this, thought loop of being probably like the first time in my life where I could have been like classified as like clinically depressed. And it was just like, unfortunately for me in my situation, I did need to create like barriers, and I did need to separate things. So where you were talking about, and I really like how you said this. I was trying to figure out how to be whole when even parts of me were missing with this new equation and family. And for me, like the mechanism was, I need to put up this barrier and not think about them, because that's the only way that I can do what I need to do over here. And that creates this barrier and this emotional wall that, if I'm being perfectly honest, it took me the better part of, you know, 6, 7 years after getting out of the military to bring that wall down, to bring my power levers back to idle, to turn the engine off, to actually do some depot level maintenance,
To pull the balls away from the wall.
This is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just have so much respect for you, man, for because we don't dictate, what happens to us, but what we can dictate is our mindset and what we do in the face of, adversity, or challenges. And Stacy, I mean, also, like, I hear that same story being woven like through yours as well. And there's something at some point in time where, like, your mindset, changed and shifted. Like, what was the catalyst for you to be able to overcome, like, those, thoughts, the suicidal ideations and things like that, into, like, thriving?
Well, first of all, gentlemen, what you shared is really difficult to share, and I appreciate you opening up about that. And I think we're probably forgetting that all the alphas are listening too. So I know, and I'm going to speak on behalf of them, that we appreciate your candor. And as for me, I have to admit that every day I wake up and I have to be consciously happy, because it's so easy to slip back to the negativity. It's easier that way. Life on a good day is a struggle.
Yeah.
And so when you're faced with what feels insurmountable, it's very tempting to just put your feet up and fall back into what I call circling the drain. For me, I look at what kind of ripple effect I'm going to leave day to day. And if it's throwing a little pebble in the water and creating a small ripple, then that's fine. That's one step closer to having a life of purpose, that life of service, and having my life have meaning. Each and every one of us have suffered, and everybody who's listening has had something in their life. And please don't, when you're hearing these stories, feel like you need to compare your traumas to the next person, because I'm here to say that every single one of us have the traumas we carry, and not one of them is any worse or any harder than the next, because we all wholly have individual experiences. And I will say that, how do I get through it? I know that I have a loving husband. I have friends who died on the battlefield who can't live these moments for themselves. And so I need to do the best that I can with what I have in these moments, and, make their sacrifice matter. And, for the veterans out there who are struggling, who are where I was 10, 15, 20 years ago, to say, listen, it's not about healing completely. It's about healing for today enough to get through from morning till night. And, gosh, if we're lucky, let's have a smile on our face. And if we're even luckier, we're going to put a smile on someone else's face.
Yeah.
And what's going to be the cherry on top of the cake is if we're all laughing. And that's what life for me is all about. And that's what my goals are from day to day, is a life of purpose, a life of meaning, and a life worth smiling over.
Oh my gosh, Stacey, that's so beautiful. And there's so many wonderful things that you said there that I think will really resonate with folks. I mean, it resonated with me. And one of the things is, you said, is comparative trauma. And man, I'm so guilty of this too. I mean, I think it's a human thing, but especially in the military, because, what do we do? And in my case, it was like literally my older brother. It's like Special Forces Green Beret. It's like medically retired. He spirals out of control. He's able to get this, just starts a nonprofit. And then what do? Like, we go and tell his story over and over again. So I was like, well, shoot, man, like, I wasn't in an explosion. I was away from the sights and the sounds of the battlefield in my, flying armored, cockpit. So it was a different experience for me. And so like some of the things that, were happening, like I downplayed because I was like, it's not as bad as that. It's not as bad as my brothers. And it was like just pushing off, being able to really finally look in the mirror and address the things that I needed to address for myself, not for anybody else or for any other reason. And it wasn't until, I was able to give myself that permission that I think true healing could happen. So thank you for
Permission.
that.
Great word. And I will say grace. And I think
Mm-hmm.
each one of you have mentioned something about, being able to forgive yourself for the things you cannot control, but also allowing yourself grace for the things that you can't, listen, we're all human beings. It's a human experience. And, if we can get through together and lift each other up, you talked about a rising tide raises all ships, and let's do that here. Let's do that on this podcast. Let's do that for our alphas who are listening. Mm-hmm. This is Team Tango. We're going to take it all the way. And I will tell you, everybody who's listening right now, if you don't do one thing, give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
And hey, if this podcast touches one life, then it will have all been worth it. So thank you. Thank you, American Legion, for putting this podcast out there, giving us the platform and to share stories and to have the opportunity to interview folks for you guys. So everybody, we look forward to sharing a whole new season with you. Joe, Adam, welcome to the show. And Alphas, stay tuned for the next episode.